I'm going to teach you some basics about computers, okay, buddy? Do you have a funny joke? Okay.
Well, actually, yes. What's bigger than an elephant but lighter than a feather?
I don't know what.
Air.
It's clever. What is this in front of us? Computers and computer parts. This is the end result where you have a computer, case, everything's inside and it works. You have different components that come as part to it. So the motherboard holds everything and it's like the hub for everything in your computer to communicate. You have your memory, which is this right here. That with this processor, this is an AMD processor. You see all the pins right there? Some processors have pins, some have bumps, but any way you look at it, this goes into this slot. Now it goes a specific way, so you have to make sure that you're putting it in there right.
That looks painful.
What looks painful?
If you stab on it.
It does look painful if you sit on it, that's for sure. And then the lever goes down and it grabs the pins and holds it there. And that's what actually helps communicate everything across the board. The processor with the memory and the hard drive, which is one of these right here. These are the hard drives. That's the information side of the computer. Then you have slots like this one and this one, which hold the graphics card, which is this big thing right here. The graphics card has its own components, but this is what processes your graphics so you can play your video games and various other things.
Christopher, do you need to blow your nose?
Yes.
So there's other slots on here that you can put other cards. They're called expansion cards. Bless you. These are expansion cards. They go in these slots right here. This one is for USB-E or eSATA, which is also USB. You plug it in to give you some faster and more USB ports. But if you look at the motherboard, sometimes they already come with them. You use that to get extra ports or to expand. Then you have your optical type drives like this one. You put in your DVD player or whatnot. This is the thermal paste that you use to go over your processor, and the reason you have that is with it spread all the way out, you put this right here. That is a heat sink. It sits right on top and it takes the heat that the electricity is causing for here and it cools it down to keep it running. So a good processor needs a good heat sink and good cooling system. I use liquid cooling. That's what all these hoses are for. I feel it cools it faster. These are hoses. They have liquid. This is the heat sink. Liquid flows through there, through these hoses, and they cycle all the way back out to this fan right here, and it cools the water down so it goes back out and then grabs the heat from the processor and lets that cool everything down. See the memory right there? I have a network expansion card. This is a SATA expansion card so I can have more hard drives. As you can see, I have plenty.
And what's the fan? Like, what are these?
Well, you see how big this graphics card is? It is so big and so strong that it actually needs power, which goes back to the power supply. It needs power of its own, and it needs a fan to cool down the graphics processing unit. So this is a CPU.
How hot the Xbox gets, it gets really hot.
Yep, it's because it's cooling down its processors and its graphics processors. So this is called a CPU, or processor. This has a GPU. You know the difference? That's a computer processing unit, graphics processing unit. So that's the difference between them. This has its own memory, just like that's memory for the computer. This whole thing is almost like another setup of your motherboard, processor, and memory, just for graphics only. Then you have your power supply, which has to be strong enough to power all of this. So once we get outside of here, you have to be able to interface and talk with your computer. Well, that's why we have a keyboard and mouse. We also have our monitors, which we plug in to be able to see.
What does the buttons run off of? How do they transfer this to the computer?
This one uses a dongle. It plugs into your computer's USB. So it goes through USB that goes to the system board that talks with your hard drive that does the operating system and tells exactly where it is based on an algorithm and circuitry inside each of these components. Some of them don't use wireless, they have wires coming out. It's the same exact thing. All right, you have any other questions for me about this?
I have one last question.
What's up?
Why are there so many cords, like, from here
So
to here?
each one of these cables in here actually correlates to a pin. So if you look, you can actually see them start to separate right there at the plug. And if I was to take one off, which I can, you have 4 different pins. You see how the cables are like this, and then they branch off to go into this one?
Yeah.
So each one has power or positive, negative, or ground of its own to power this unit. This one requires a lot of power. These are hard drives. You notice how this is a bigger one? It's called a 3.5 inch. It's also called a spinning disk drive. I use this for data storage. These are solid state drives. Much faster, but I don't want to use them for anything that I delete right away. So this I use to hold my games and applications and operating systems and stuff. Any other questions, buddy?
Yes.
That fan cools down the liquid for the processing. This fan cools down the whole case. This is just a housing unit. It houses my optical drive and also houses, if you look right here, this faceplate to tell me what the fan speeds, the temperatures of my hard drives and units are. This is a thermal monitoring system that I have wired throughout my computer so I could actually see if it's overheating or not. It's not necessarily something that has to be done, but
Why are these flat?
because they are. It makes it easier to organize and put them in there. Some of these cables, like this one, you notice is kind of roundish. It's the way they work. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like the video and want to see more of it. YouTube is linked below. Patreon is linked below, as well as my social media sites and my website. Feel free to send an email to contact@slatecomp.com and I'll be more than happy to review it. I can get back to you. Thank you and join us again. We'll have some fun.